I help newcomers, expats, and businesses connect across cultures to succeed in less time and pain. I am the founder of Hyaku Coaching, which is dedicated to helping you create your pathways to success in a new culture. The purpose of Intercultural Insiders is to share the stories of people with intercultural experiences. So if you're feeling isolated or lost, you can hear something from the guests' experiences that can help you, even if it's just a reminder that you're not alone. And this is the dangers of when you go into your streaming service for recording and broadcasting and find out that the entire interface has been changed just a few minutes before going on. So it took me a couple of minutes to reorient myself. Hopefully things will go smoothly from this point, but if there are any technical difficulties, then you know why. All right, so soon we will be getting into our second part of our conversation with Shini Sahni. But before we do that, I thought I wanted to just talk a little bit about some experiences that I had over the weekend, because I had lunch with my aunt and uncle who were visiting from Scotland. And we went with my wife Liliana to my mother's home, met my brother and his family there. And at the restaurant, we connected with Ronald, who is the son of one of my parents' former students from their days in Nigeria. And he was named after my late father. And he is, of course, now living and working in Canada. So at the table, we had 6 national cultures from 5 different continents featured in there. There was, of course, Canadian, Irish, from my mom, aunt, and uncle, and also from Scottish, Argentinian and Japanese from Liliana, Croatian from my sister-in-law, and Nigerian from Ronald. So again, actually 7 different national cultures from 5 continents at one dinner table, one family gathering. And which just brings me that idea of those different cultures connecting in different ways to form a family, leads me into my part of my introduction for part 2 of Shini Sahni. Now, as a reminder, Shini is a mental wellness and fitness coach who worked as a psychotherapist for 17 years in India before transitioning into coaching. She is currently in India, but will be relocating to Canada later this year. And in today's session, she talks about India's cultural diversity and how it connects to relocating to Canada, the awareness of cultural tendencies and how it differs from stereotyping, and being proud of your culture while living outside of it. So as a reminder, this interview is pre-recorded, but Shini is live in the chat. So please feel free to ask questions and comment during the interview. And start off by posting where you're joining us from. Let us know, because there are always plenty of opportunities to network in the chat. So the more that you share of yourself and interact in the chat with audience members and ask questions to Shini and myself and offer your own comments and ideas, then that is going to make this more interactive and better for everybody. So without further ado, hopefully this works out. Again, working with a completely new interface. Let's get into part 2 of the interview with Shini. Something that's coming up in your future. Your plan is to move to Canada. Although you haven't been to Canada, you've had a number of experiences across cultures in India, which is quite diverse in its own right. How does that inform your plans of adapting to Canada?
I think, John, just by virtue of being an Indian, there is so much cultural diversity that we experience here. This is the land of cultural diversity. We have so many different communities living together. We have different religions coexisting. So many languages, hundreds of languages that are spoken in India. We have, I think, 22 official languages of the country. So that's the kind of diversity. So many festivals. It's a birthplace of Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, Jainism, so many different religions. that originated here. Customs, rituals, and people from every state, they have their own unique cuisine, their own food habits. And being an urban Indian myself, I think I've had the privilege of getting exposed to so many different traditions, customs, regional cuisines, just because I went to school with people who were coming from different parts of the country. I've had friends who belong to different communities, different religions, and we celebrate each other's festivals. We participate in all the customs. There is a lot of cultural exposure within the country itself. I think that it makes us adaptable. It makes us ready to embrace other world cultures as well, because we've done so much of it back home. I feel where the challenge comes in is also that there is a certain intimidation factor, and
something that's coming up in your future. Your plan is to move to Canada. Although you haven't been to Canada, you've had a number of experiences across cultures in India, which is quite diverse in its own right. How does that inform your plans of adapting to Canada?
I think, John, just by virtue of being an Indian, there is so much cultural diversity that we experience here. This is the land of cultural diversity. We have so many different communities living together. We have different religions coexisting. So many languages, hundreds of languages that are spoken in India. We have, I think, 22 official languages of the country. So that's the kind of diversity. So many festivals. It's a birthplace of Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, Jainism, so many different religions that originated here. Customs, rituals, and people from every state, they have their own unique cuisine, their own food habits. And being an urban Indian myself, I think I've had the privilege of getting exposed to so many different traditions, customs, regional cuisines, just because I went to school with people who were coming from different parts of the country. I've had friends who belong to different communities, different religions, and we celebrate each other's festivals. We participate in all the customs. There is a lot of cultural exposure within the country itself. I think that it makes us adaptable. It makes us ready to embrace other world cultures as well, because we've done so much of it back home. I feel where the challenge comes in is also that there is a certain intimidation factor, and I know this because people have spoken to me about it as part of their experience, that people from different parts of the world, they look different. There is an accent, of course. Now, even within India, we have accents. But then you have the comfort of knowing that the person you're talking to looks just like you. I think it takes a little bit away from that. It's not as intimidating. And then you've been having those conversations with people from within the country since you were young. So it's not that daunting a task. Or conversations, and especially for people who are not fluent in English, let's say, because English is widely used across the world. All of them may not be as fluent in English. Some would be, some would not be. I think that definitely becomes an obstacle, because understanding what the other person is saying becomes that much more of a challenge. Explaining what you want to say becomes that much more of a challenge. So language does, of course, play a very big role. But yeah, as an Indian, I think the beauty of belonging to and growing up in this country is the kind of cultural exposure we get. I think for Indians who are moving abroad, it would definitely be a strength for them, the kind of cultural exposure they're already coming with. They've been with and been friends with and been a part of so many different traditions, customs. You tend to pick up 2 words here, 2 words there from different languages. You may not be fluent in that language. You may not even understand all of it, but you definitely know words. These are small things, but they are of significance, which I think for me personally, I think it does play a role in making me feel more confident having conversations with people from other parts of the world. I remember having a conversation with someone from Spain. He was not very fluent in English and I don't speak Spanish, but we did manage a reasonably good conversation. So it does create that sense of openness to explore, openness to try and understand the differences. I think India definitely does give us that.
Yeah, that early exposure to different cultures makes you more open. Any particular experiences that you remember in India growing up that stuck out for you in terms of lessons that you can take forward with you when it comes to connecting with other cultures?
We were speaking about my challenges in school, and I think the first time I realized that people from different parts of the world, their sensitivity levels and they are different in the way that they might respond to the same situation. That was not even an idea in my head before that. A girl moved to our school when I was in, I think this was grade 7 or grade 8. She joined our school. We also lived very close to each other because we were going to the same school and then also hanging out together in the evening. So we did spend a lot of time together. She had done her primary education in the US. And when I shared my struggle of why I was so uncomfortable talking to people, why I felt so underconfident, the way that she responded and the empathy that she came with, the concern and the understanding she approached that entire conversation with, I had not experienced that before. I had not experienced that with my own people. So that just goes to show that the level of sensitivity and awareness and the way that people respond to a certain situation, and I'm not blaming anyone here and I'm not giving credit to the way things are done in another part and blaming the way things are done here, but just the difference. And that made me realize that, okay, if I just give myself a chance to open up and give myself that space to open up and just talk to people without worrying about what their reaction might be, because I'm just assuming how they'll react. It turned out so beautifully. And that was in fact my first experience of understanding how somebody who's coming from another culture and from another part of the world would respond and handle that situation so differently from what I had seen before. And that stuck in my mind because that was a formative experience. It was still when I was in middle school. So it's one of those early middle childhood experiences.
That's a great point that you made about making assumptions about how someone's going to react. This is something that we all need to keep in mind when it comes to reaching out to others, whether it's to share challenges we're experiencing or when we're anticipating conflict in a conversation. And I think that applies when you're making assumptions about anything about a person based on your own past experiences, based on the stories, the cycle that you're caught in, assumptions about people being different in some way. If we stay open, we might be surprised what happens.
Absolutely. And also I've realized that this whole us versus them thinking, it's so easy to buy into that narrative. Us because we speak a certain way, them because they speak differently, they look different, their way of doing things is different. So let's just us stick together. I think that entire narrative and all of us buy into it at some point or another. It's very important to just break free from that and overwrite that hardwiring, stepping out of our own comfort zones and just talking, understanding. I've actually heard such amazing stories from people where they, on their travels, met tourists from other parts of the world and they did not speak the same language at all, not even a few words. There was no language in common, but they managed to communicate and spend time together, enjoyed meals together. That is so beautiful. So I would definitely say just being open to the idea of trying to explore that area of not letting things like, oh, we don't speak the same language or we don't look the same, not letting things like that come in the way. And I think it can surprise most of us because we go into conversations with those assumptions.
That's an excellent point that you make. And as you said, an us versus them mentality, not even in the sense of being open racism, for example, but it's even to the point of seeing it as, oh, they don't speak English. But it's also, as you said in your story, okay, this person didn't speak English very well. And you added on, I spoke no Spanish, right? Yeah. So it's also that awareness as well, rather than being a judgment on one side. It's a recognition. Okay, so there's a difference here, but we can find ways around it. You were able to find a way to communicate with them. And as you mentioned, other people who had no language in common at all, still being able to enjoy time together. And I think it's the idea of avoiding judging others and also avoiding judging yourself, because I've seen this happen where you end up judging another culture as being better than your own culture. Oh, they are so much better. I've seen that happen with people going to Japan and say, oh, Japanese culture, this is so much better than ours. And recognizing that, no, it's not necessarily that one is better than the other. There may be different approaches. If we were to take it, say, to connecting with people, there may be approaches that in certain situations might be more effective, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better for most situations. Getting onto a more technical point about intercultural studies, task focus versus relationship focus, for example.
Yeah, that stood out for me, I think specifically in the last couple of months, because I've been having conversations with a lot of people based in Canada, in US, and this has really stood out for me. And it's interesting, actually, how people in certain parts of the world are, especially when it comes to work, they are so task-oriented, and it's very impressive. Things like punctuality, things like efficiency, productivity, we're given so much value and importance, and it's beautiful. But then again, if I compare it with some other parts of the world, including where I come from, India, there is so much focus on relationships. It's very relationship oriented. Or let's say you have a big submission at work or wherever, even at school, people can just get by saying, oh, so and so thing happened at home, or between you and I, we have this understanding, and I'll do it, so give me a little more time. So that flexibility is there. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. Each one has its own strengths, each way of working. But I really think that both of these are so important. If we look at it, productivity, efficiency, time management, being punctual is so important. But then so is empathy at the workspace. So is maintaining and developing non-transactional relationships, building a community around you, building a support system around you, which will happen if we build those relationships. So I think finding that sweet spot in the middle, finding that balance, I personally feel that can be transformative in a way.
Speaking as someone who was very task-oriented and transactionally based when it came to relationships, particularly on the business side of things, I've certainly benefited from taking a bit more of a relationship-oriented approach when it comes to the work that I do. As you said, getting into that sweet spot and understanding when you can leverage your own experiences, and when you are going into another place as a person who is from outside of that culture, there is obviously a need to adapt and adjust to fit in with the expectations, but also being able to have that outsider's perspective and realizing there are times when you can bring your own experiences in and enhance in ways that person who's from that society may not even realize is possible. And being able to ultimately act as a bridge between culture.
I think that also, and I'm speaking from experience, it also does a little bit to break stereotypes, because I've been having these conversations and a lot of things have come up as part of these conversations. And somebody actually asked me, oh, how come you did not think of pursuing engineering? Because that's what Indians do. And I said, no, that's not what all Indians do. And there are Indians like me as well. There are Indians who cannot process numbers. We exist. So I think there are certain stereotypes that we all hold about people coming from different countries, from different regions. Even within India, there's so many stereotypes that we hold about people coming from different parts of the country. I think building relationships and becoming more open to having those conversations, which are non-transactional, you're just investing your time and energy in getting to know the other person, is a beautiful way to deal with those stereotypes as well. That's been my personal experience.
I think that awareness of cultural tendencies can be valuable, because then it opens up your mind and it makes you aware of certain things. But this is why I'm also leery of teaching do's and don'ts when it comes to cultures. Oh, to do this and don't do that, because then it's easy to just fall on that and switch off your brain. Oh, okay, this person's from India, so that means I don't need to be on time because they probably won't be either. And not considering the person. So having the awareness, okay, generally speaking, business culture tends to be like this or that. But the most important thing is having awareness, and that means listening and paying attention to what's going on and what the other person is like, and then adjusting based on that. So very good of you for mentioning that.
On the other hand, then there have been some extremely bizarre conversations as well, if I can call it that. It's just ridiculous in nature. I was talking to somebody who's Indian, who's moved to Dubai. And we were just talking about how work processes are and how the whole work culture is. And I happened to make a statement or two about, oh, I feel very proud about the way we've been doing things here, and there's been progress and things are so much better from the time I remember the years that I grew up in, or the time that I started working. And he made a statement like, oh, so if you're such a proud Indian, how come you want to move to another country? And that kind of stumped me for 2 minutes. I didn't know how to respond to that. And then I asked him that just because I'm moving to another part of the world doesn't make me any less proud of where I'm coming from. These are still my roots and will continue to be my roots. I can be a proud Indian anywhere in the world. When you move, you are not only becoming a part of a different culture, but you're also carrying your own culture with you. You're carrying your own value system, your own upbringing, your own traditions with you. You are sitting in a place where there's so many immigrants in that part of the world, in Canada. And I know for a fact that different festivals are celebrated and different communities, they get together, celebrate things together, get involved in each other's traditions. That happens. So I think where these conversations also help is in tackling with this thought process of, oh, if you're so proud as an Indian, how come you don't want to live in India? To me, that was a little silly.
Let's face it, when we look throughout history, I think the world would be completely unrecognizable without different influences through various migrations and so on. And I think the idea that to be proud of your country, that means that you have to stay within its boundaries. I think this is the point of being able to expand and share and learn from other cultures and give what you have learned to other cultures. I think something that Canada can benefit from greatly is by being open to these other ideas from other cultures and bringing in people who have these different lived experiences. So thank you for sharing that.
Which is where I think just normalizing having these conversations, just why it's so important. The more we openly talk about these things, the more normal they become. We don't run away from them. We don't shy away from these conversations. And these conversations are also so relevant to just about everybody, not just a country where people are migrating to or not just a country where people are migrating from. I think these are experiences that everybody's had at one point or another. And if we tend to just put a veil on things and have veiled conversations and not really touch upon what actually needs to be addressed, it becomes that much more difficult for change to happen.
Yes. And having these conversations, as you said, leads to greater change and leads to us being able to better express ourselves and adapt to different situations, whether it's moving to another country, being more open about other challenges, neurodiversity, or concerns about mental health. I think just being open and being able to talk about these things is, as you said, so beneficial. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to speak about?
When we were talking about students, the challenges that students face, I think because of being that age, having certain conversations can seem a little difficult. It can seem intimidating because you're talking to people who come with way more experience, who are older, who are in authority positions, whether be it in organizations or be it in agencies that are helping them settle in. And I have seen this happen, and I have heard this from students who have migrated to different parts of the world, that something needed to be said, and that would have gone a long way in making me feel more comfortable or helping me acclimatize better to a new environment, to adapt better. But because that conversation was not had, because that topic was not approached, and this applies just as much to working adults also, not just students. And this is something that I really believe in, and I have learned to do this myself. I have put in a lot of work into this over the years to take up space and speak your mind, because nobody is a mind reader. People don't know what's going on with you until you tell them what's going on with you. A lot of things that we perceive as challenges are actually not even challenges. It's just that they have not been spoken about, and they can easily be resolved. That's, I think, my 2 cents. I think something that can make a bit of a difference in just being more comfortable, even if it's fake confidence, just getting it from somewhere and using it to have those conversations.
Thank you for all of what you've shared today. For those who want to connect with you, what are some of the ways that they can reach out to you?
I have shared my website and my social media links. LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me. I think my email is mentioned there as well. I'm pretty responsive on email. That's a good way to get in touch with me.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, Shini. I really appreciated hearing all of your experiences and your thoughts as a mental health professional and your own personal challenges and having the courage to share those as well. So thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you, John. Thank you for making me feel so comfortable. And I really enjoyed this conversation. It was engaging. It was interesting. And thank you. Thank you.
All right. So now it's saying Q&A here. This is something I am struggling with, but the different aspects of this new interface. But the important point was that was part 2 with Shini Sahni. So very excited to have her here to share all of the things that she was doing and all of her thoughts about adapting and being being what it means to be a proud Indian or being a proud person of your culture. You don't necessarily have to stay in your country to be a proud member of your culture. In fact, it's just as easy to to export your culture elsewhere. So I think that we've had a lot of people joining in, many visitors from India. Thank you, Niraj, for joining in and commenting as well. Okay, and I see that Niraj has a question, so this may be a good opportunity. We're coming close to the end of our time. So Niraj, please go ahead and type in your comment here. And we'll see if we can have time. We've got just a couple of minutes left. So if you can't answer it now, then if we don't have time to answer it now, then it may, we can do it offline, perhaps. So yeah, this is, again, the opportunity to ask questions even during the stream as well. All right, and Shini is encouraging as well to please go ahead. Niraj? One thing that I do want to comment on is also showing that there is going to be the next stream for next week, next episode. I was trying to set it up because, again, this was happening at the last minute, but I'm unfortunately won't be able to show the screen for that. But next week, there is going to be the first part of the conversation with Meg Noteboom, who is a mentor. She is, in fact, a newcomer mentor facilitator who works in Toronto from TNO. She is also a newcomer or an immigrant from Canada, immigrant from Japan who is in Canada, who's immigrated to Canada. So she's got a lot to share there. She talks about not conforming to Japanese society, but also feeling out of place in Canada, and the responsibilities of employers in Canada to help bridge the gap for newcomers, and the benefits of mentorship and networking to your success in Canada. So again, I'm not able to share the screen for that, but we'll be sure to do that. Of course, you'll see that up if you're paying attention. You'll see the screen and the title card for that next time. So we are running out of time. So thank you for the questions, Niraj. I see Niraj and Shini are talking about those in the chat. So that's it for us for this week. So I will be sure to take some time to get familiar with the new interface here. Until then, keep navigating your way between cultures towards your goals. Thank you very much.